Well, hey gamers, it's your creepy uncle back to talk to you about Scorn. Now, Scorn was released yesterday, and surprisingly quickly, there have already been a few reviews on it. Hell, I got my silent playthrough up the same day as it came out, and I do have a commentary playthrough, which I actually recorded before the silent playthrough. So my commentary playthrough, which is my first playthrough of the game, I will be releasing over the next week or so, episodically, in between a few of the Scorn videos that I'm going to make. Now, you might be asking, what are my opinions on the game? What do I think about it? Well, my opinions are, it's alright, which is a very tepid reaction considering that a lot of my popularity in the past month has been because of this game entirely. But I'm not gonna lie to you. It's not a bad game, right? It is pretty good. There are a few problems with it that I will mention, but overly speaking, I do really like it. Now, let's get the first and most obvious out of the way, right? Is it worth the price tag? It kinda. I will say, right, that gameplay wise, I would like if most games like this, I would not say that they would be worth the price tag, right? Of like £30. Usually these sorts of indie games go for around £20, £25. Like Subnautica is a big one that we could mention. However, even famous ones like Subnautica aren't as well polished or as pretty as Scorn is. So, given the amount of work that the developers have actually put into this, probably does actually justify the throwing in that extra $10 for, a far more artistic and pretty game. So, I actually quite agree with the price point that it's set. I do not think this game is overpriced. However, was it worth the 8 year wait? No, not really. I don't think it was. Uh, I know that a lot of stuff they had scrapped originally, so most of this was probably made really in 4 years rather than 8. But I do not think what they came out with was exactly worth the 8 year wait. Granted, the alternative was waiting even longer for something else, but, Now, I'm going to split. I'm going to start off with what I really liked about the game, right? And if you want to see my silent playthrough, then you can watch that. This video is going to be uploaded before my commentary playthrough, but if you're watching this by the time that commentary playthrough is uploaded, then well, go watch that as well to hear my thoughts about the game as it progresses. So I'm going to split this video up into, three sections, right? The first is going to be what I loved about the game, what I thought it did well, what I thought was great. The second, where I feel it lacked, what it failed to do. And then the last will be, my conclusion. And I'm not going to criticize something without, having good solutions. So I'm going to talk about workarounds that the game could have pulled to at least reduce the, negative aspects that it had. So first are the positives. First thing is that Pekla actually did deliver on everything he promised he would give us. Obviously, there are things that, he said he couldn't do or whatnot, but, he would told us a lot in advance what could and couldn't be done. And he did deliver on everything that he said he would. Maybe not in ways we expected, but he did deliver on it, which is, rather unusual for these sorts of games. So that there is exactly to his credit. The next, of course, is its artistic style. Artistic style is exactly what Scorn has been running off. It's beautiful, macabre scenery that we all know and love, which hooked most people into this game, this weird, wonderful, phantasmal world. That is there, and that is, it's in full force. It's the full thing. And the first time I played through this, there were certain sections of this game that really awed me personally, especially towards the end, that temple area. I felt in such awe and amazement when I saw all this for the first time. Now, the problem is it does die on you rather, quickly. The novelty of this does die on you rather quickly, to be honest. But we will talk about that a little bit later. Look, the next is this is not, a drawn out game. It's not slow paced, right? Like, when I played Agony, and I'm going to make a few comparisons to Agony because Agony was basically its competitor back in the day. When I played Agony, a lot of parts of Agony did feel rather drawn out and slowly paced, especially towards the end, right? The start of Agony was pretty decent, but towards the end it felt rather slow and paced. Scorn, on the other hand, is not. It's not as slow paced, which, to be honest, we'll get onto it in the criticisms, but it doesn't work as much in its favour as you might think. Because if you notice about my second playthrough, the silent walkthrough, I completed that with 0 deaths in 2.5 hours. And to be honest, when those speedrun submissions open up, I might submit that as a speedrun, that. The next positive thing that I really liked about the game was its puzzles. I actually really enjoyed the puzzles. I know a lot of people struggled with them, but I really, they got me thinking, right? And I actually, snapped them up really quick. I was pretty good at them. And because they weren't easy by any stretch, but if you thought about them a little bit, it was easy to get. It just took there a minute about thinking about what it was and then solving it, which I was really good at. And if you watch my commentary playthrough, you can hear me discussing this. I really enjoyed the puzzles, and I'm actually ashamed there wasn't any more puzzles in it than what there was. There's actually a very limited amount of these little puzzles that you could do, and they're very restricted to certain areas. The one part of the game that I did absolutely love, or at least the way they did this, was the combat system. Kind of. I know most people didn't like this, but hear me out, right? I don't think many people realized, at least watching people's playthroughs of it, I don't think people really seem to realize that with these enemies, right, they only attack you if you get too close and they aren't actively hunting you, right? And so if you get in their path or get within their little vicinity, they will begin attacking you. So it feels more defensive. And the thing is you can, run away, but if you, fight back, then all of the ones in the nearby area will dart to that position and try swarm you and try to attack you, which I think was actually a really cool mechanic and fit the game well. They're not particularly just neutral creatures that'll leave you. They're not passive, right? They're not going to leave you alone, but they're not too hostile either. And I thought that suited Scorn really well, that sort of combat system. And towards the end, oh yeah, by the way, I'm throwing spoilers out the window here. You get all the spoilers if you listen to this. I assume most of you played it anyway. There was a bit towards the end of the game where you fight this guy with a grenade launcher, right? And I actually enjoyed that combat. I thought that was really cool as well. You can also see how in certain areas of the game, lots has changed. For example, there was a bit where I noticed the demo area, in fact, from, way back in 2017, when the demo came out. There's an area that is basically revamping the demo system, and it's been changed a lot, mind you. That whole area has been changed, but it's still recognizable, and I think that's pretty neat. But granted, the game doesn't do many things, but what it does do them very well. But this is where I want to get onto the criticisms, because everything that I said that was good about this game also has a lot of problems. And the main problem that you'll notice is, well, not necessarily the runtime, but you'll notice that it was very short. Only 2.5 hours was what I completed in my second playthrough. In the first one, I did it in 5, and that was only because I was taking times to look around and do, taking more times with the puzzles, right? They said this would be a, 6 to 8 hour game. My man's, I did it in 2.5. Shut up. And I'm not actually going to say the length is its major problem. Everyone says, it's too short. And I guess it was, right? Because one of the big problems was that it was too fast-paced, I think. Is that it showed you tons of things, but it didn't let you sit and simmer with them. There was just, a thing shows up, and then that's it. You move on, it's gone, right? And it doesn't let you simmer with them, really. And at certain points, things that feel like they should play a much larger role in the game, right? Like that red flesh that grows everywhere was just entirely in that crater. It was entirely in that facility area. But once you move out of there to that temple, well, it's just gone. It's just disappeared. And so you're wondering just, well, how does it really play into it? Scorn said it wanted to do environmental storytelling, but making things very fast-paced and not being able to sit there and simmer with it doesn't fully work, right? Now, there was also the saying that to, fully get what's going on, you're going to need, to play multiple playthroughs. Now, whoever said that was a fucking liar and a half, because, first off, to get all the achievements, you only need 2 playthroughs. And you'll get basically, there's 12, you'll get 11 if you play through once, because all the achievements are literally just to play through the game. The only different one that you can only get for a second playthrough is the second achievement, and it's based on whether you kill Mold Man or you release him to help you along. It's like you get 1 achievement for killing him, you've got 1 achievement for releasing him, so it's literally just like that, pretty much. So it's not entirely all too, especially not to the common person, it's not entirely all too a replayable game, right? But I did say that the problem with it wasn't necessarily the length. Well, what do I think the actual problem is that comes up in the game, right? The problem I think with the game is it's too linear, right? It's just, let me explain to you how the levels work in this, right? It is that you're at point A. There's a puzzle you got to solve at point A, but you're missing a piece of it. So you travel to point B to get the piece to that puzzle, go back to point A to solve it, and then move on to point C where the process repeats. There is also the fact that there is just a lack of enemy types. Like, there's a weird thing where certain areas will be completely crowded with enemies, and then certain areas will just be devoid of any enemies. And like, you'd think you could like scatter a few different kinds of enemy types around, but it just like doesn't happen. There's also the big shame that the grenade launch that we saw in one of the gameplay trailers just isn't in it. Kinda it is, but it's only right at the end for a couple puzzles where there aren't even any enemies. Well, that's not entirely true. There is one, but you shoot him in the back and he instantly dies, so it's kind of pointless. Oh yeah, also speaking about the weapons, they changed the design of the pistol. Well, I really liked the old design of the pistol. 0 out of 10 game, right, just for that. The other thing is, remember when I gave it that compliment before about the way the AI works, where these creatures, the Chuckus, right, where they will help each other, right? Well, there is one problem. The problem with it being so linear is it's also very cramped, and so half the time it's like, what can you just have to like sit and wait as it's something slowly moving across for you to be able to go. Sometimes that doesn't really work. There is another problem in that nothing really feels like it connects. There are 4 major areas in the game, or 4 areas in the game. There is the first, which is the Fields of Decay, which is really short, and you literally just get out of your pod and walk right to this first prologue area. I'm not sure what we'll call that, because it hasn't actually been named. We'll just call it the treatment plant, because they're mincing all those dead bodies, aren't they? So, you start off with the treatment plant, then you die after that. You wake up as another person in the Fields of Decay, and then you immediately go right back to this treatment plant, and then slowly you venture deeper into what's called the crater, or in the game files it was actually called the Abate Assembly. You then travel to the bottom of that, and then take a lift in a rail cart to the Temple of Pleasure. So the first problem is that it doesn't really feel like it connects all too well to each other. It feels very just completely different. It's like, it's good that they all have their own themes, but it feels like just the biomechanical structures are really the only thing connecting them together, and it doesn't help that some of them are just really short and you don't do anything in there. Like, particularly the Fields of Decay, and to a lesser extent the Temple of Pleasure at the end. There isn't all that much time spent in them. And it gave the illusion, like, the prologue is probably the most well-designed part of the game. Like, you can see that, you go back to early areas that you were before, sort of thing. It is actually intertwining with itself. But the rest of the game just isn't like that. And so it also has a problem in which it doesn't have really a build-up to anything. It just kind of, all of it just kind of happens, once you go down, you're up in the treatment plant, and then you take the elevator down to the crater, into the assembly plant, and then all of a sudden everything's just infested with flesh, and there's no real build-up, there's no gradual build-up to the infestation of flesh, really. There is a gradual build-up to the big monster at the bottom of the crater, which this beautiful lady, by the way, she's actually called the Crater Queen, apparently. She is a beautiful fair maiden, and I will not have any of you in the comments say otherwise. There was a good build-up to that, and I think that point in the game is a big high point. I think that's a very good point in the game, and I like that build-up, but generally everything else really doesn't, and I feel like it should have a slower build-up. Like, the different, you got your different areas and their themes, but I feel as though there should be, like, transitions between them, like, that don't just happen instantly, that it's a slow transition. So you see, like, you go, you traveling down in the deeps to getting to the crater, and as you're getting there, you start noticing the flesh is slowly building up as you go further down, rather than just throwing it all in your face at once. And so the other problem with this is the storytelling is it's far too hidden and doesn't really fit the linear path it wants you to go down. Otherwise, it's just a sightseeing tour, really. Like, there clearly is a story. I can see that all the pieces are there. And of course, I'm the theorist guy, so I'll be making more YouTube videos of what its story probably is. So I can tell you that there is certainly a story there. The pieces for it are there, but the game does not tell it very well. You can see aspects of a story, or the pieces to a puzzle, but it's just there are clear big chunks in it missing. And I'm sure you all feel about the game differently. I'm not saying it's particularly bad, I'm just saying it has these very glaring criticisms. But the thing is, I think there is actually a very easy solution to all of this. It does feel like there was a lot more that they wanted to put into this that they didn't because of time constraints. So yeah, they had 8 years to do this, time constraints, yeah. But, I feel like it probably was, like, they're a small studio, and to make something like this is pretty incredible for them, really. So they should definitely deserve credit for that. But the problem, of course, is that there seems to be a lot that they wanted to put in, because there are areas that it looks like you could and should be able to get into. Like, there are things to do that you can see that you can do in there, but you just can't get to them. And so it does appear to me as if the developers cut a lot out, like, cut a lot of the areas out. And so what do I think would have made this better with that in mind? I think not just necessarily more time in the oven, because, like, fucking hell, I've been waiting 8 years, Jesus. Obviously, it needed more time in the oven, but I think what would have made this game absolutely perfect is if it was non-linear, right? If it wasn't just one, not even necessarily longer, if it would just wasn't one path you had to walk down. If they made it so that, yes, you have these main points, but it was an interconnecting web of diverging areas. First off, also more areas than just those four would probably have been a lot better, but, you have, but different interconnecting paths. Like, they did that in the early demo, right, to, like, a limited extent, where you had this one area to go, but there were a few different ways you could get there, right? Even though it was just the demo. And so it looks like they may have wanted to do that, but as, they had to crunch for time, they probably had to cut a lot of that stuff out. And so I think maybe, like, a director's cut version of Scorn would be a good idea, where they then add in all these non-linear paths that you can go down. And it would make the storytelling a lot better as well, I think, right? First off, if there was multiple ways to get to a place, right? And I think multiple endings could have been done for this. Like, there are multiple puzzles in it, and you go down one path, you solve all these different puzzles as you go down it, and the different things that you do along it change the outcome of the ending could have been a good idea. More areas, a better transition between these areas. Also, it would have been a lot easier to do, I think, in a non-linear fashion, if that, like, take what Subnautica did, where it dumps you in the world, here you are, you find the little story missions as you go along, and it's just the full world. You can rush about it all you want, right? If that's what Scorn had done, right, and maybe like you use these puzzles to unlock new paths to go down, that would have been good, and it would have made it far more replayable, really. And I think the environmental storytelling would have benefited a lot from this because now you are actually encouraged to explore the world, so you're actually exploring the environment, which is something that, the storytelling wants to be environmental storytelling. Well, so you encourage people to like go through it, to like actually rummage through it. It also would have made that mechanic of the monsters ganging up on you if you attack one of them a lot more interesting. I feel that would have added another gameplay mechanic. Let's say you were trying to go down one way, right? But there's a monster there, and like, oh, you're low on health, you're low on ammo, right? So if you try fight it, a bunch more will come. Then, well, it's like, okay, well, maybe it's better I go down this path. So it's like the environment by random chance is also forcing you down like certain paths. So you are actually interacting with the ecosystem in a sense. I think would have greatly benefited this game. And I think it could probably be solved by maybe like, I don't know, a DLC, or I said a director's cut could probably be done. Like, otherwise it just seems like an overextended art exhibit. Like, because the story is really hidden, and I don't think it should be. I think if you're going to have the story like hidden, you should do it in a sense where you actually have to go searching for it, really. Which, of course, I think works better if the whole game is just a large maze you can explore. Which I think is what many people expected. It's what I expected, because I thought that's what they meant when they said interconnecting regions. Though I would get that that would probably double the scope of the game, what I've just said. Which is why I say, maybe make a director's cut version where you do have that, because the game's pretty decent for what it is, but I'm sure that, with now that you've got this basis, I'm sure Pekla could probably build off it to design probably what he originally intended. Like, a lot of the problems this game looks like what he originally intended may just not have been able to come to fruition, which he may have a better shot at now, so he's, hopeful for the future. I will also say, right, with the graphics of the game, I do like the ambience of the different levels have different colorations, right? However, I'm not sure about the green coloration for the whole crater area with all these like Chucky creatures, because I actually really liked the old comic book art style that the game had. It looked somewhat like a comic book, like a little bit cartoonish. And I actually really liked that. It's one of the things that I somewhat fell in love with originally. And generally speaking, those are my opinions on Scorn as a game. Now, I do hope that that's not just it for Scorn. I think Scorn in general would have been better if it was just one game that they had put in all the stuff that I'd said in, but as it stands now, I do think it could probably benefit to have a few more installments to let people explore the world more, because the major thing with the game was, even with all its glaring flaws, because you can see such simple solutions, it leaves you desiring more. Like, you want to know more, you do want to play more. And even with the other playthroughs that I had of this game, I quite enjoyed playing through it again. I didn't have any issues, right? When I was, of course, replaying it, and it still feels a joy to play. Like, the audio and graphical, like, cues this game are absolutely spectacular, right? And you should check it out if you have the chance to. Of course, if you're unable to buy the game because, you don't have Steam or an Xbox, you probably play on PS4 or something, or you're an African child or an Indian child who for some reason has a phone but doesn't have plumbing, then you can actually watch my silent Let's Play of it that I uploaded a few hours after the game came out. But those are my general thoughts on Scorn as a game. Now, in terms of Scorn content, I do have more Scorn content I want to do. Apart from the commentary Let's Play that I'm going to be editing down and uploading, I also want to go over the people who've left comments on my videos where they've talked about their own theories and see how many of you were right and discuss them. revamp the idea of philosophy. Like, rather than talking about the philosophy behind Scorn's inspiration, start discussing what we can infer from the philosophy itself. Which may come into another point that the problem with Scorn is there's a lot of allegory, but the story is too hidden. Like, allegory and, me, like, paintings is usually fine without story, but in, like, things like media, films, and games and all that, you kind of need proper stories for the allegory to feel like natural. And there's a story there, it's just way too hidden. However, the messages it deals with are pretty interesting, and I also want to do a story video, so discussing the story, like piecing together from our theories, seeing what was right so that we can piece together a story for this to fully get a grasp and understand what's going on. So, of course, I still have more Scorn content to make, and hopefully I can keep it up if the devs decide that they want to make more games set in this universe. Which, I think they should, because there's a lot of people left wanting more after this. And of course, if you want to keep up with other things that I'll be doing, then I do have more horror games that I want to play. I think the next horror game that I want to do a playthrough of is Mad Father, because I really like all these old RPG Maker style horror games. So if you want to stay tuned for Mad Father, then be sure to do so. But I know many of you, were disappointed by Scorn. Some of you were excited by it. I do think that there is a thing in which it's much more fun to watch footage of it, than it is to play it. Because I did quite enjoy watching some of my own footage that I have of the game. Like, I watched my silent playthrough over again. And mind you, these dickheads have copyright claimed my silent playthrough video. Apparently, this section of the game has music from Alex Kaskin, and the song is apparently Spooky Boiler Room. Now, I haven't been able to find Spooky Boiler Room anywhere, and Alex Kaskin did not work on the sound design of the audio for Scorn, so it's not his music, so I don't understand how I can get a copyright claim for something that isn't even his. And mind you, he wasn't even the one who copyright claimed it. A third-party company called Hawk, which are these dickheads who supposedly protect people's music, but it's like, well, you see, that's not even his music. That's just soundtrack to the game I was playing that he didn't even work on. Now, it's not like I'm making money from any of my videos anyway, so it doesn't really affect me, but it's annoying as hell because it's completely illogical and nonsensical. So I opened up a dispute anyway out of the principle of it. And before I end the video, yes, I am in fact the man who got banned from the Scorn community Discord server for saying I was going to shoot up Ebb Software Studios to get the game early. When I said it, I thought it was pretty funny, and in retrospect, it still kinda is.